Just a quick story on Wayne. Frankly, I didn't recognize him because he was sitting down when I came in. I'm used to looking up when I talk with him. But the first event my wife and I ever attended as commissioners was the picnic at Region 4 that John put together. And we walked away, both of us got in the truck, and the first words out of our mouth was, "This is about family. This is really about family." And one of the bigger impacts at that picnic was Wayne and his family, talking with them, but then talking with his son, and the passion that he had for what this agency's about, the real admiration he had for his dad. It doesn't get any sweeter than that. And as you can see, just through the list of things that were read, and they were read very quickly, that family has been about kids, I believe, since Genesis. And so it is a treat to see you receive this award today. It's well deserved. For your family, sir. For your family.
Before you leave, Wayne, I just want to mention one little quick story too. Back when the Olympics were held, in Atlanta, the TWRA had the responsibility for the law enforcement on the Ocoee River for all of the things that were assigned to that. Wayne and I were both at that time on river rescue team. I have a picture in my office up there, Wayne and I standing by the river. And the only reason I pointed it out is, for whatever reason, I had the great idea that it would be good to run up the Ocoee River in a jet boat. And I just want to end the story by saying I know he's glad to be here alive. So.
Thank you, Director Carter. Thank you, Wayne. I didn't know you was patrolling Douglas Lake. Commissioner Baker does not have a get out of jail free card or nothing, so just feel free. All right. Moving on. Wildlife Committee, Chairman Jeff McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman Bledsoe. At this time, I'd like to ask Chief of Wildlife Darrell Radachak to come forward.
Thank you, Commissioner McMillan. Yesterday, we brought forward 9 proclamations for the Wildlife Committee to consider. And before we get underway, although there's countless individuals within the agency that contribute to the season-setting process, just amazing officers, amazing biologists, everyone that contributes to this process deserves a lot of credit. What I'd like to do is just personally recognize our coordinators yesterday who presented the information to the committee. I think they did an excellent job. As Joy Sweeney, who does our WMAs, Chuck Yost, who presented all the deer information, Roger Applegate spoke on the turkeys, and Joe Benedict spoke on some of the waterfowl stuff. I think they did an excellent job. I also like to personally thank the commission for the support they've given us, and as well as all of our coordinators. So to get things underway, we do have a number of proclamations that we will be requesting that the commission consider. And so to start things off, yesterday the agency presented the recommendations for Proclamation 15-03. This is the big game season proclamation. We presented this to the Wildlife Committee, and at this time we ask the commission to adopt Proclamation 15-03.
Mr. Chairman Bledsoe, the Wildlife Committee and I recommend passage of proposed Proclamation 15-03, statewide big game hunting seasons and bag limits.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion from the commission?
Would you let me propose the amendments that occurred during committee at this point?
That would be good. We'll vote on the amendments by the full commission one at a time.
All right. First amendment was to reduce the statewide buck season or limits from 3 bucks to 2.
I'm assuming that's made in the form of a motion. Do I hear a second? Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion from the commission? Any discussion from the audience? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Amendment carries.
The second amendment that I would like to add in the form of a motion is an additional 5 days of antlerless deer season to Unit L on private land between the end of regular deer season and the juvenile season.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion from the commission? Any from the audience? Hearing none. All in favor of amendment number 2, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment carries. Are there any more discussions on Proclamation 1503?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose an amendment.
Yes, sir.
Yesterday, we had a pretty extensive discussion regarding the elk population in Region 4 and the potential for extra tags. There was discussion from the public that we had a fairly large area we were adding, and we were taking 2 other zones, whatever they would be called, away. There's also a pretty significant difference in numbers that we're hearing on the number of elk that we have right now. And understandably, there's always going to be a difference. After discussing this with Region 4, and John, if I misspeak, please tell me here. I would like to propose an amendment that continues the elk hunting zones, that they would continue to be open as were open during the past season, plus the addition of the 2 extra zones that Region 4 proposed. We will keep the tag numbers the same for this year until we can get a better quantification as to our elk herd. But the intent would be, if the herd is what we think it is, and with these increased areas, that hopefully we could add tags to next season. So that would be my amendment.
I have a question. I think we're on the wrong proclamation. I think that's WMA's, I think. Is he right?
L,
Okay, I'm sorry.
1503.
I apologize. Second question, when you say keep the tags the same, right now we have 5 and 1. If we're adding Tackett, we're not gonna add any tags to Tackett?
It just gives them an optional area to select. From my understanding of what was presented, they get to choose the area in priority that they can go, and we will allow, if somebody wants to pick Tackett, they can do that. John, am I correct on that?
Yes, sir.
The problem, as I see it, is those elk have been up there for close to 14 years, and there have been numerous attempts to determine how many elk are actually on that area. I know at one point, our safari club came up with money, and they were going to do a helicopter survey with thermal imaging at night. It was too mountainous. They couldn't tell the deer from the elk. And to say that we're going to wait for better information, I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, they've been trying, I've talked to Steve Bennett, they've been trying all this time to determine how many elk are there. And I don't think there's a good method for doing that. Personally, I'd like to see the areas remain the same and add 2 or 3 tags to the Target Creek area. I was told that those elk up there were stocked by the state of Kentucky right across the line, 44 elk several years ago, and most of those elk that are down in there are Kentucky elk. That's just my personal thing. Of course, we don't have a second on your motion yet, and we're already discussing it.
That's what I was gonna say, is that,
I'll second the motion,
thank you.
but I do have discussion when it's my turn again.
Motion on amendment's been made and seconded. Discussion from the commission.
I'd like to offer an amendment to his amendment to add 3 elk to the Target Creek area and to keep the areas the same.
Second.
Second amendment, an amendment to the amendment has been made and seconded. Discussion on that.
I spoke to Steve Bennett at length last night, and while he obviously wouldn't commit to me anything that the staff had passed, but we discussed Tackett Creek, and he agreed that you could put as many as 10 hunters up there, and they might not kill an elk because it's such a big area that, it would stay in the tags. So I think adding 2 or 3 tags is not gonna hurt anything. And the second thing is, Tackett Creek is a better, will be, if it's not already, better habitat, I think, John, because it's more strip mining and it's more open. So it's probably gonna be better habitat and there may be more elk up there than we think there are. So I don't think, according to the impression I got from Steve, that having several tags up there, it's a bigger area than we're hunting now. So that's the reason I support adding tags up there. And I support what you're trying to do. I just think we need to add a few tags up to that 40,000 acres.
I'm all for adding tags for the target area, but I have a real problem with the discrepancy in our numbers of how we're gathering the information. Do we have 250? Do we have 450? How many elk are in Tackett Creek? I just hate to see us rush in there. If we're down to 250 from our original 450, and I have real concerns about what's going on with our elk, and I don't want to be up here and be responsible for adding more tags to something that we really don't have good information. I mean, I don't know why we got to hurry into this unless we can get some better information.
But we're not adding tags where the discrepancy is.
But we've reversed what the agency's wanting to do because we've dropped in numbers in their opinion. Now we're adding those zones back, are we not?
No, but I asked Steve about that, and not to take a particular issue with what was reported yesterday, but Steve said if I had to swear on the Bible how many we've got, I've only seen 200. I said, do you think that's all we've got? And he said, absolutely not. There's no way we can count them. I said, would you say we've got closer to 500? And he said, probably so.
I just personally love to have Steve here so the commission could question him.
Well, I said that yesterday, but I think that, here's where we are now, and I hate to see us take anything away. And the Tackett Creek area is so big that it's and the elk have been up there for years. So I just gonna see what's gonna hurt. And I sure don't want to take anything away from where we've killed 29 elk in however many years we've been hunting. You kill 5 a year, and if the number's right that we've only got 250, we probably got 100 bulls. Let's say we got 100. That's only a 6%, 5% kill a year. We kill more whitetail bucks than that out of the herd. So I don't think what we're doing, and I discussed this with Steve, and I'm not saying anything that he's going to particularly take issue with, even though, like I said, he hadn't gone to go against what the agency recommended, what they voted on, but I didn't get anything out of him to say this morning that I believe he would disagree with.
Mr. Chairman. I think Steve wanted to be here, and because family matters could not be. I will vote against the amendment to the amendment, if I'm saying that right, only because the numbers that were shared yesterday, and with all the respect for Region 4, that was a new number I had never heard before, was the 250. And I believe that this warrants, I agree with you, we're never going to have a real accurate count, but if I can talk to my wife from Lenore City and talk to her in Mozambique on a cell phone, I have to believe that we can narrow this gap of numbers that's floating around. I think Steve and Region 4 need the opportunity to do a presentation on this. 1 year is not going to hurt with respect to the number of tags, holding it the same. I hope we can add tags. I want the factual data, at least the best we can have, to do that. Likewise, by opening up these other areas that were proposed, leaving things as they are and opening up the new areas, if somebody's adventuresome, if there's a guy that wants to tackle that area, they have the opportunity to choose those areas. It is a large area. They don't have to, but they have the opportunity to. But adding tags until we have more solid numbers, I believe, is a mistake, and I would respectfully vote against the amendment.
We've been trying to determine the population up there for many years. I've been, in a roundabout way, I'm related to Steve Bennett, so I talk to him all the time. I've been up there several times. We photographed the elk, And I can tell you that we're never gonna have a good count of how many elk we have up there just because of the remoteness of the area. And when these elk were put here, it was with the stipulation that they be hunted. And I don't think taking 3 elk out of Tackett Creek is gonna make a bit of difference on the population up there. And what it does, it gives hunters more opportunity.
Understood and very respected, and I'm not respectfully disagreeing. I'm respectfully asking for more time for staff to support that position.
Just to be clear, the numbers that you're trying to get cleared up, I think you're talking about where we're hunting now, not Tackett Creek. Because they didn't talk about numbers with Tackett Creek yesterday. The 250 was an existing hunting area, so we're not getting confused about where we're trying to quantify the numbers. So
But Bill, even at that, we've been getting different numbers there. And the 250 even surprised some of our staff.
but 250 was not about Tackett Creek.
Ms. Woodson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of thoughts. One, I'd like a little clarity on the original amendment from Commissioner Cannon. As I understand, yesterday's presentation was adding 2 new areas in, 1-year cycle on pulling 2 out. This amendment would, for the 2 that are pulled out for a 1-year cycle, put them back into the mix. Am I understanding that right?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Secondly, I think a couple of thoughts. Last month's meeting, we had a full presentation and a conversation. Yesterday, we had a full presentation and a conversation. This issue was not raised in committee. It doesn't mean that there is any prohibition on any member of this commission to raise that issue. Absolutely within the right of any member of the commission. I think particularly given there is so much information that is unknown, I find it inconsistent with how I think we would want to do business when the mission of the agency and this commission is to be very circumspect about how we manage game and wildlife for the benefit of the citizens of the state and the hunters of this state. I just think it is an interesting place we're at in this moment on the Second Amendment. And even the first, but the first you can weigh out. I'd love to hear from the agency in terms of the potential negative impact, but we're adding 2 new areas in. That seems to provide more opportunity for hunters. We're putting the 2 areas that were proposed back in. Unless there is a concern that that would have a negative impact on the game, that actually seems to be consistent with the conversation yesterday. I feel like there's a lot of information that we don't have to make an informed decision, and so I would agree with Commissioner Cannon's thoughts that it's not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing, because I think we would all want to provide the maximum number of opportunities for hunters in the state to participate. But there was a wonderful opportunity for 3 hours yesterday and a wonderful opportunity for 5 hours a month ago to have this conversation. And I just think that the public's looking for us for some stability and to not get surprised. And I think if we had all the information, things evolve and we make new decisions and they change and we propose new ideas, and that's part of a legislative body. But I just think when you have, when some of us are in the dark, I can only speak for myself, I don't have information. And so at this point, I'm just uncomfortable with making a decision with my eyes closed. And so that would only be a comment, but I just think we ought to be thoughtful about how we want to operate. And that's just a thought perhaps to the chairman, and I'm comfortable having information, being able to think about it, being able to look at it, being able to sort it out, listening to the agency, listening to the citizens that we serve, and having more than about 4 minutes to make a big decision. And so I would only just make that comment, Mr. Chairman, and that it is not a reflection that we've all got different styles, but that's something I'm a little more comfortable with.
Could I ask John or Dan one to come up and give us an explanation on the original proclamation, on why, on the purpose that y'all had for wanting to close those 2 areas? And
Dan Gibbs, Region 4. As I said yesterday, we were looking at, Tackett Creek coming on was a positive for us because we could put allow some hunting on Tackett Creek. We know there's elk there. The numbers are very difficult to get, as Commissioner Swan said, but gives us an opportunity to take some pressure off what we refer to as the core area where we've been hunting for the last 6 years. Put a tag up there, also open Braden, put a tag up there, and pull some pressure off that core area where all of our elk are coming out of. That was the intent. And hopefully get a better feel for what's up there. It's very difficult, as Commissioner Swan said, to survey. We see the tracks, we know the animals are there, people see them, but it's a very large area. And so there's a lot of things going on. Now the numbers, you know, you hear 250, you hear 400 interchangeably, but you know, Chuck sent me the chart this morning. Last 5 years, the average has been 263, I believe. That's the average. And then, as I said yesterday, you got the high end and the low end of the confidence interval. So you hit 400, you're getting up towards the high end of that CI. So, but basically, that's what we talked about. This is what Steve and myself and all the guys here, you know, we discussed, went through all of our staff that, you know, given that the last 5 years we're seeing basically very little to no growth. Now, if you look at a 10-year thing, you got a little bit of growth over 10 years, but the last 5, the short term, it has seemed to stabilize. And we just believe that that area has potential to have a lot more animals in it and that it hasn't reached carrying capacity. So we're wondering what's going on there. And so that's what the recommendation was born out of, was that desire to say, hey, let's take some pressure off of it. We have Tackett Creek now. We can move one hunt up there. And yes, it'll be a challenge. It'll be a huge challenge that I think some hunters will be more than happy to take to try to get an animal. So that's kind of where we are on that.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question for you. Don't sit down. I talk to Steve every spring about calving and how many he sees and how the recruitment is.
Right.
And I've not heard anything from him that said we're having a problem. Every year he says it's good recruitment. We got good calves. I've seen 30, I've seen 40, I've seen 20, whatever it is. And he said we found 3 that were dead and whatever. So I don't know where this flattening is coming from. At Hatfield Knob, we had 11 up there in 2003. We got 84 up there right now, and there's no big bulls in there. They're all gone somewhere else. Right. So in 12 years, you've gone from 11 to 84, possibly 100 in that herd. I don't know why it would be any different in the rest of the area. Maybe that's a little better area, but why would it be? Why would we not be increasing? I mean, I heard, you know, in 2006 and 7 when we established to try to get a hunt, I mean, the numbers were bouncing around 400.
Right.
So I don't know why we would.
That one year, the year we hunted, if I'm not mistaken, it was well over 400th estimate. But since then, it has dropped and leveled off. And you see those types of things. But, you know, talking with Steve, he was just talking with me and John a few weeks ago about a desire to see if we can't find some money to do some work on looking at reproduction primarily. I believe he's looking mostly at calf survival. We know we're getting calves on the ground, but there may be something going on with survival. That's something he's run past John and myself as far as looking at potential for putting together a research proposal for something like that. But yes, Steve sees calves, but he is concerned about how well they're doing after those initial surveys. So there's a lot going on, and you know, 1 or 2 animals added probably doesn't make the difference, but sooner or later you'll hit a point where you do start having impacts. And as a region, you know, we're staying on the conservative end until we get a better feel for what's going on up there. And that's what the recommendation is based on, is we want those elk to grow and do wonderfully. And we don't want to get ahead of ourselves on some of these things.
Why would the survival rate be falling in other areas in Hatfield Knob, it's still increasing? I mean, what gives you why do you think they're dropping?
Steve needs to answer that.
Well, I talked to him last night, and that's not what he told me.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Woodson, and then
as part of, there is no hunting, but as far as all the other issues, has Steve had more issues with disease outside the area than at Hatfield Knob? Poaching, roadkills? Those types of questions are the questions that Steve can answer for you guys more specifically, because he's the one that's out there day to day dealing with those animals. And I know Steve will have an answer for you on that, but someone else had something.
Yeah,
I
I
think.
just
Yes,
had a
ma'am.
question. On the original amendment is to place the two pieces that are proposed to be pulled out for the
Mm-hmm.
year in the proposal. One, none of this is about your personal opinion, but in
Right.
terms of the potential impact of the amendment, can you talk me through, sound policy, neutral?
Commissioner Cannon's amendment?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, just for clarification, our plan is to rotate them every 2 years.
2 years. Thank
2
you.
years.
Thank you.
That is something that we were looking at to do long-term, okay? So after a couple of years, we evaluate to see if we want to pull those two out and add them back in and get into this rotation system. So putting that off for 1 year is not gonna.
Putting it off for 1 year,
No.
adding 2 new areas in, that's going to be a neutral to positive, but
I think, the main thing is keeping the permits the same. To me, I don't know, it might be easier just to let it ride the way it is for a year currently versus adding the areas. I don't know, just from a confusion perspective, because you open up this year, all 6 or all 7 areas are open, and then next year 2 of them aren't. But
right. Well, a couple
that's a
of
little bit above what my decision
Sure. Well,
making at this
I
point.
think you're right. The
so.
communications are really important on how we would do it. My instinct tells me adding new in, even at the risk, getting the communications right, that we would all have an understanding
Mm-hmm. Right.
that it's not going to be taking something away to have responsible management to move them. But I'll also say, I also think this is the business of the Wildlife Committee.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the proper forum for these conversations and the data that we're all talking in third person about.
Right.
A person, bless his heart, who is not here to be able to give his own opinions. We're all talking about what his opinions are or aren't. So I just thank you so much, Mr. Gibson.
You bet.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Rip.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would oppose the amendment to the amendment, echoing what Commissioner Woodson just said. In my business, we're very careful not to rely on what people have said outside of the forum where we have a chance to talk to them. I have no question that Commissioner Cox has spoken to Steve and gained some excellent information, but it strikes me that we are speculating here today with regard to this amendment to the amendment. I've heard why, don't we know, do we know, is it 250, is it 400? There's just a lot of speculation. I would oppose the amendment to give us an opportunity to get Steve here, let him tell us what he believes the situation to be. He's obviously an important component in this whole thing. His name has come up about 10 times here this morning. So for that reason, I would suggest that we adopt the amendment as originally proposed by the first time around. Thank you.
Could I ask Chuck Yost to please come up for just a moment? What, your thoughts?
Chairman Bledsoe, I think I can help just clarify the numbers, but I would need to take the podium. Is that okay? So this is a graph of the population estimate that's done annually, and you'll notice that the last count that we did, which would have been this past December, that the estimate was 273 animals, and this is all the estimates that we have done since we started conducting these annually. So I would definitely recommend that all decision and consideration be based off the numbers that are before you.
How do you determine these estimates? Do you think this is really viable information?
I do believe it's viable
But,
information.
and how did you obtain these estimates? Because I've talked with Steve a lot of times, and he says, you know, we put the cameras out, we count them, but we really don't know.
Well, it is worth acknowledging that this is an estimate, and, but is it a valid estimate? Absolutely. And it does give us, a view or an opportunity to see how this population is changing over time. And you do notice that, say, take 2006 when the survey started. I should clarify that 2003 number is actually the number of animals stocked up to that point. So the survey data actually begins there in 2006 and then runs through 2014. And the line is there to represent that there is a positive trajectory to this population. Now, give me just a moment to back this up, and I want to show you this. And this is kind of, there's quite a bit of information here, but see where my mouse is moving. You'll see the population estimate from this past year at being 273. Now, lots of times when you start to talk about these estimates, you need to consider this figure as well, and it's referred to as a 95% confidence interval, and then you see a range of numbers. And what this tells you is that we can, based on the survey data, that we can be 95% sure that the mean or the number for this population falls within this range. So this is what the model is telling us, and lots of times when people talk about these models, they recognize that they're based on a set of assumptions, but they are valid models for analyzing trends within populations. And I would say that if you would like to discuss more about analysis and how these models are, how they are developed, Dr. Gray Anderson is here and is a much better expert at this than I am, so I would just recommend him as a source.
Do these include surveys up at Tackett Creek?
I would have to, they do, yes, sir.
My understanding is it does not include the Hatfield Knob group of elk. Is that correct?
I would have to refer to Region 4.
Be sure.
Commissioner Cox, all those areas are surveyed. Now, whether or not those counts are included in this number, I would have to refer that to Gray. But we survey the area that we hunt, we survey Hatfield Knob, we survey private land, and we survey Tackett Creek. The survey is along the whole elk
But
zone.
specifically Hatfield, I understand is not in it. Is
I've
Dr.
been up-
Anderson, is that?
I've surveyed Hatfield Knob myself. Now, whether or not the numbers are included in this, Gray would have to answer that, but we do survey it.
So he's not here.
Gray, you want to clarify on this, please?
Thank you. Gray Anderson, Assistant Chief of Wildlife. My understanding is Hatfield Knob is considered in that survey. And so I'd have to go back and look at the actual data sheets, but it typically has been part of that survey through time. So I don't know why it would be taken out of this number. So I don't know about the outlying areas. That's one of the things that we're not catching because this, as Chuck mentioned, this is a very sound scientific method used heavily out west, works beautifully for these types of populations. But the animals that are spreading out across the landscape are tough to pick up. So it's really more of an estimate of our core population. And it gives us a pretty reasonable estimate of that core population through time. So I think there's great validity to the number with an understanding that those confidence intervals are very wide, but also can be improved with additional survey estimates, our survey effort. Meaning more time in the field, more animals seen, et cetera, et cetera. But the actual point estimates themselves are very solid and pretty consistent through time as far as what we've been surveying.
One more different question. In a typically healthy flock or herd, taking 6% of the males out of the population is not gonna affect the recruitment and the, is that correct? That's what we've been told over the years. I just wanna confirm that.
And this goes back, and Dan and I were chatting about this before the meeting. If I put pen to paper, removing the extra animals mathematically is probably not going to make a difference. What Region 4, I believe, is asking is really getting at the social issue of impacting that herd. And so, and I'd have to, the removal of those big bulls out of the herd and the impact of that ultimately on the reproductive rates and all of those other things, it gets into a whole nother level that is away from removal. And so gets into those social issues that Steve, being on the ground up there and talking to his counterparts in other states that are believing these herd bulls are critically important, I think that recommendation, as it sits before the amendment, is based upon that social impact, which is not really accounted for in the mathematical models or our surveys.
Since you brought that up, and not to hearsay evidence, I asked Steve about that, and he said he does not believe we've killed but maybe one herd bull, and he's 14 years old, big bull. We're not killing the herd bulls.
And I haven't talked to Steve about the herd bull stuff. So, but happy to answer any more questions about the technical nature of the survey that we have or anything else I can provide.
Thank you, Gray. Thank you, Chuck. Oh,
Chuck's data showed that in 8 years, there's been a 64% increase in the herd. How is that, as you're trying to establish a herd? Is that what you would expect? Better, worse? How's that?
Unknown, to be honest with you. I mean, not to be, squirrely here on you, because our herd is completely different than everybody else. I mean, one of the commissioners mentioned that even Tackett Creek in Kentucky are completely different than the areas that we put our elk on. So the fact that we started at 167, saw huge amounts of mortality in those early years. We didn't really know the survival rates at that point, don't have a great idea of what happened, but then we came back 5 or 6 years after we put the elk out there and ran our first estimate, and we started at a 200, and now we're seeing, and I cautioned everybody, because the great part about the elk program is this is the only wildlife program we have in the state of Tennessee that we actually manage on a standing herd. Everything else, as you saw yesterday, is harvested estimates, and so this program is the one that we knew was important because the population was so small when we started it that we needed to make sure we weren't over harvesting, and so we went out there and got this estimate, and we stumbled through a lot of things before we got here, but there's validity in what we're seeing. But the long-term trend, initially, if you saw that graph, it started spiking straight up, and I warned everybody, don't get too excited, because it should start bouncing around. As any standing herd population estimate, it's not going to be a perfect right along that line. We're going to see some annual variation associated with sampling, associated with how many you see, associated with how much effort you put out there. So we know there's going to be some bounce, and that's what we're seeing right now. And so we have a long-term positive trend line. Dan has a great point that we're seeing the last 5 years, don't compare it all to that initial growth, but we're still seeing, start at 167, initial survey at 203, and now we're at 273, and we're seeing consistency in those point estimates through time are giving me great confidence that our elk population is heading in the right direction.
thank you, Gray. Thank you, Gray, and Chuck, and Dan. Any more discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Commissioner Watts.
Mr. Chairman, since we've heard from the staff, and since Steve's not here, we haven't heard from Steve, I would have to vote against the amendment on the amendment.
We've had a motion and a second on the amendment to the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
The amendment to the amendment fails. Back to the original amendment by Commissioner Cannon, and it has been seconded. Any more discussion?
Please read the amendment again, please.
Mr. Cannon.
The amendment would be to maintain the elk hunting zones as were during the 2014 season, plus adding of 2 other zones as recommended by Region 4. Is that said appropriately?
Any more discussion? Discussion from the audience. That was leaving it at 5 permits.
5 plus 1.
5 plus the juvenile, yes. All right. All in favor of the amendment on elk to proclamation 1503?
Can I ask something
Yes.
for the agency? Is one of the two, I'm not super familiar, so bear with me, but one of the two areas that y'all propose to close, is there one of those that's more of a concern than the other, or is it all the same?
Of the two, that we were proposed to close, the Massengale, the one that's, in the Anderson?
Yeah, I don't have enough information. I'm a little reluctant to go against the recommendation of the agency in this matter, just because I don't feel like I have enough information. I'm nervous if they got together and made a decision that they were concerned about herd bull being killed, or for whatever reasoning they had. I'm just a little apprehensive about opening that up if at this time, just because I don't know if I have enough, but I don't know, maybe I need a little more information. But
And all the discussions has been, Steve's absence is hurting this discussion. And when he asked for leave, we said yes, but he needed to be available. But as Commissioner Cannon said, some family issues came up that made that, we couldn't do that. He would have been here, and that was the original agreement, but you never know, the unforeseen happens. And that's why we couldn't have him here today.
Yeah.
I know it would have helped tremendously.
it's a little conflicting because I'm hearing secondhand information about his opinion of possibly supporting increased hunting opportunities, but I'm assuming he was involved in y'all's proposal to close these areas for a year.
The recommendation worked through the system. Steve and the wildlife management area crew and John and Danny, who oversees all our WMAs, were part of the team that came up with the recommendation that we brought to Nashville.
Mr. Chairman, and forgive me if interrupting Commissioner Teague, I have done a master's job, which I have done in the past, of probably complicating this issue. Steve did participate in that discussion. Staff had the discussion. Commissioner Woodson, your words are wise, and based on that, I withdraw my amendment.
Amendment has been withdrawn. Oh, okay. Do you remove the motion? Who made the second?
I did.
Okay. You still,
I'm gonna renew the amendment.
okay.
I think you're right on the ball. I mean, I don't see any indication that this herd is hurting. He just got through saying we could leave it, the numbers like they were. It was, another year wasn't gonna hurt a thing till they got better information. I think you're right on the ball. I don't think there's no reason to cut opportunity. Commissioner Woodson, was concerned about it not being addressed yesterday. Actually, it was, and I brought it up during committee, and we discussed the numbers and asked for Steve to be here, and we discussed it a little bit. But I renew the amendment, just like Dr. Cannon. Aren't you a doctor? Professor Cannon.
I don't know if that needs a second or not, but I'll second it.
Okay. And a new amendment has been made restating the original amendment and been seconded. Any discussion?
Thank you, sir. The only reason I thought that if we did shut those two units down is going to force hunting of Tackett Creek, right? And what better way to find out how feasible it is to be hunting that area and what's there than to have people in there milling around and coming back and giving a report. If you feel like there's a lot of pressure down there and we're not going to increase the number of permits, close one or two of them and let's move some tags up there and force them to hunt there. This drawing of a lottery is an incredible opportunity, but it's not a guarantee of a kill. So elk hunting's tough. It doesn't need to be a white-tailed deer hunt out of a stand. It needs to be a true elk hunt. And so I'm kind of for seeing what's up at Tackett Creek, and if we decide next year to increase the number of tags, then we'll have all the zones being hunted. So, you know, I still think the fact that if Steve Bennett was in on the discussion, he wanted to close it too, sure would be nice to hear what he says on that too. So I'm for leaving things as the agency wanted to do and force some hunting in Tackett.
Aren't they have a choice to hunt Tackett? If we leave it at 5, they'll have a choice of where to go.
Yes, if you make all zones available for the elk hunt
Okay.
with 5 permits, then that selection process, they'd have 7 choices to list. Tackett could be one of them.
Right.
So, because there's only 6 permits and the juvenile has the ability to hunt all of them, those 5 tags all could stay where they've always originally, nobody's still hunting Tackett. Correct?
Of all the zones.
Well, close one area
If the
that you want
5
to
plus
pick
the
and make
2.
somebody hunt Tackett, is my thought.
Isn't it true, though, there hadn't been 100% success on the elk hunt?
Oh, every year? That'd be correct.
Over the years, there hadn't been 100%.
There's
There
been
have
some
been
years
people
with
who have
100
not
There's
killed
been
elk.
some years with 100, and then I think one short one a couple of times. I think that's right.
So
2
it's-
years, there was one short, one of the pay hunter from California, I think it was, actually was bow. He was an elk hunter, hunted with a bow, had seen a big bull, didn't see it and passed it up. Still came back saying he had a quality hunt. He just didn't take the bull he had an opportunity for. And then last year or two, a gentleman missed one on the last day, and so he didn't fill his bag.
So they're not necessarily guaranteed hunts then?
No, sir.
Okay.
Call for the question.
Question's been called. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay? Miss Barbara, would you roll call that one, please?
Chad Baker,
Aye.
Jim Bledsoe,
Nay.
Carol Cannon,
Nay.
Jeff Cook,
Hey.
Bill Cox,
Aye.
Kurt Halbert,
Nay.
Connie King. Aye. Jeff McMillan,
Nay.
Jim Ripley,
Nay.
Bill Swan,
Aye.
Trey Teague,
Nay.
David Watson,
Nay.
Jamie Woodson. No. We have 9 against and 4 yes.
All right. The amendment to Proclamation 1503 on elk fails. Moving back to the original amendment, is there any more, moving back to the original Proclamation 1503, is there any more discussion on 1503? Any discussion from the audience? All right. Vote on Proclamation 1503 as amended with 2 amendments. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Proclamation 1503 passes as amended.
Thank you, Commission. Moving on to the next proclamation, Proclamation 15-04, which is the Wildlife Management Area Hunting Season Proclamation. Yesterday, the agency presented the recommendations for Proclamation 15-04 to the Wildlife Committee, and at this time, we ask the Commission to adopt Proclamation 15-04.
Chairman Bledsoe, the Wildlife Committee, and I recommend passage of proposed Proclamation 15-04, Wildlife Management Area Hunting Seasons, Limits, and Miscellaneous Regulations.
Second.
Proclamation has been, or motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion from the commission? Discussion from the audience? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Proclamation 1504, Wildlife Management Area Hunting Seasons, Limits, and Miscellaneous Regulations carries.